Welcome back to Crossover Commander, where we show you how to take your favorite pop culture characters and cross them through the blind eternities so that they can command your deck with style. I'd like to send a huge shout out to my patrons, Deface and Zephyr at my Adept tier, and Nitron and Matachu at my Knight tier. As a consideration for all of you fans out there, consider please subscribing to the Patreon. It gives you early access to my gameplay videos, as well as, if you do the Knight tier or above, an option to get your very own deck. Speaking of which, Matachu, your deck will be coming here shortly, as soon as I get a free minute in life. But yeah, so please come check it out. Let's kick this portal into overdrive, shall we? Gargamel, the perpetual chaser of the little blue people. He was on the Smurfs. Some of you may have watched that growing up. Others of you may have no idea who I'm talking about, or realize it's kind of a dated reference. But two cool things about this deck. First off, it was made by my wife, and it kicks some serious ass. Number two, it is the deck that I played on the very first episode of Crossovers Portals, so if you haven't seen that, please go check this deck out in action. It definitely gets places. So let me introduce the commanders for this deck. We've got Gargamel the Dark Baron, and Azrael the Shadowcat Familiar. So Gargamel has flying, and whenever another creature dies, you put 2+1/+1 counters on him, and whenever another player loses the game, you gain life equal to that player's life total as the turn began. And he partners with Azrael, who gives commanders you control have Menace and Death Touch. Now, these guys work perfectly together to make sure that they get through and deal good combat damage. And Gargamel always gets a little bit stronger if he's able to get them Smurfs, so works perfectly. This deck is focused on Gargamel getting those Smurfs and can Smurf your opponents as early as turn 10. The strategy for this deck is very to the point. Be on defense in the early game until Gargamel enters the field, and then swing. To claim victory, Gargamel plus board wipe equals win. This is the perfect time to remind you that this is a crossover-themed build. With that being said, crucial cards for the theme will be added regardless of price. Cards that are not essential to fit the theme will be made as budget-friendly as possible. So another cool part about this deck is it's super smurfing simple, alright? We've got 31 Swamps, a Cabal Coffers, a Nykthos Shrine Nyx, a Witch's Cottage, and then we've got Mortuary Mire, Voldaran Estates, Soul Ring, Charcoal Diamond, and Paradise Plume. Alright, so we are going to start off with some of Gargamel's companions. All for 1 black mana, we got Pharika's Chosen, Typhoid Rats, Serrated Scorpion, Foulmire Knight, and Indulgent Aristocrat. Now, the one thing they all have in common is that most of them have Death Touch, but the ones that don't either give a sacrifice outlet or punish your opponents for killing it. And then we've got Viscera Seer, which is a free sacrifice outlet, which is super important in this deck. Along with Blood Artist, which says for 1 and a black, whenever Blood Artist or another creature dies, target player loses 1 life and you gain a life. Lots of creatures are going to be dying, so this is going to help you end your game. And then Corpse Hauler gives you a graveyard shenanigan option for 1 and a black, and then for 2 and a black and sacrifice it, you can get a target creature out of your graveyard to your hand. Then Boot Nipper gives you either Death Touch or Lifelink, and then Gifted Aetherborn gives you Death Touch and Lifelink, both of which are for 2 mana. And then we've got Rancid Rats for 1 and a black. It's got Skulk and Death Touch. Then we got Death Bloom Fallid for 2 and black. When it dies, it creates a 1/1 green Saproling token. Great for sacrifice fodder, get you 2 creatures for the price of 1. And then we got Grim Horror Specs for 2 and a black. It allows you to draw a card whenever another non-token creature you control dies. And then Hobbling Zombie does the same thing as Deathbloom Thallid, but it's got Death Touch, which is very important. And then Morbid Opportunist says for 2 and a black, whenever one or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability only triggers once each turn, but that is totally okay. And then we've got Scribd Nibblers for 2 and a black. It says tap, exile the top card of target player's library. If it's a land card, you gain a life, and then with landfall, you can untap it. And then we got Vampire Nighthawk for 1 and 2 black, Flying, Death Touch, and Lifelink. Awesome creature in this deck. And then we got Driver of the Dead for 3 and a black. When Driver of the Dead dies, return target creature card with converted mana cost 2 or less to your field. And then Bushmeat Poacher says for 1 and tap, you can sacrifice another creature, gain life equal to its toughness, and draw a card. And then Bone Picker for 3 and a black. This spell costs 3 less to cast if a creature died this turn, and it's got Flying and Death Touch. And then we got Vile Entomber for 2 and 2 black. It's got Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a card and put it into your graveyard. Then we got Deathgaze Cockatrice. It's got Flying and Death Touch for 2 and 2 black. Then we got Skyclave Shadowcat for 3 and a black. It's got 1 in black. Sacrifice another creature, put a 1/1 counter on it. And then whenever a creature you control with a 1/1 counter on it dies, you draw a card. And then Thorn of the Black Rose for 3 and a black has Death Touch and gives you Monarch. And then Eyeblight Colors for 4 and a black says when it dies, you mill 3 cards and you gain 3 Elf Warrior creature tokens. Now before these creatures, you noticed a bunch of small stuff like snakes and rodents and vulture-like birds. That's because Gargamel hangs out in a dirty castle, right? Now these guys, though, these are some nasty creatures that are probably in his dungeon, maybe because he did a couple of weird spells that he probably shouldn't have. Anyway, we got Cryptghast for 3 and a black. It's got Extort, where you can pay a mana for extra for each spell you cast and gain 1 life and lose a life for your opponents. And it says whenever you tap a swamp for mana, you add an additional black. Then we've got Magus of the Coffers for 4 and a black. You can tap it and pay 2 mana and add a black for any swamp you have in your control. It's the same as Cabal Coffers, just on a creature. And then we got Harvester of Souls for 4 and 2 black. It's got Death Touch, and whenever another non-token creature dies, you draw a card. And then Nirkana Revenant for 4 and 2 black has the same thing as the Cryptghast. Whenever you tap a swamp for mana, you add an additional mana. Alright, so this deck's got lots of little magic spells and little magical objects that'll help us get where we need to be. We start with Tragic Slip for 1 black. It's an instant. It says target creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn, but if it's got Morbid, meaning a creature died this turn, it gets -13/-13 instead. Then we got Bone Splinters for 1 black. As an additional cost to cast the spell, you sacrifice a creature and destroy target creature. Disentomb returns a target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. Spark Harvest, you can either pay 3 and a black or just a normal black if you sacrifice a creature and it destroys a target creature or a planeswalker. And then Vorpal Sword is one of our coolest cards in this deck. For 1 black, it's an equipment. It says equipped creature has +2/+0 and has Death Touch. And then for 5 and 3 black until end of turn, Vorpal Sword gains whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. This will help us even if we don't have enough counters on our Gargamel to one-hit kill. We'll be able to get through and steal that sweet, sweet life total. And then we've got Swiftfoot Boots, Mask of Avacyn, and Lightning Greaves, all here to do the same thing, and they all cost 2 mana. But they're all here to give your creature hexproof or shroud in the case of Lightning Greaves, and make them harder to get dealt with. And plus, Gargamel's gotta be fashionable. And then we have Eliminate for 1 and a black. It destroys a target creature or planeswalker with converted mana cost 3 or less. And then Forever Young, for 1 and a black, put any number of target creature cards from your graveyard on top of your library. That way you can continue to draw those creatures that you need. And then you draw a card. And then we've got Ghoulish Procession for 1 and a black. It says whenever one or more non-token creatures dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature with Decayed. This ability triggers only once each turn, but that's totally fine. And then we've got Brawler's Plate for 3 mana. It's an equipment that gives you +2/+2 and has trample, which is very, very important to get that commander damage through. And then we've got Call of the Death Dweller for 2 and a black. Return up to 2 target creature cards with total converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is almost all of them. Put a Death Touch counter on either of them, and then put a Menace counter on either of them. This will be a nice little gotcha trick to get some more creatures back on our board once they've died. And then we've got Witch's Vengeance for 1 and 2 black. Creatures of the creature type of your choice get -3/-3 until end of turn. This will help you deal with all those pesky smurfs. And then we've got Nature's Ruin for 2 and a black. It destroys all green creatures. I know these little dudes are blue, but they're nature spirits, so green, right? And then we've got Drown in Sorrow for 1 and 2 black. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. You scry 1. And then we got Victimize for 2 and a black. Choose target creature card in your graveyard, or choose 2 target creature cards, in your graveyard, and you sacrifice a creature. If you do, return those chosen cards to the battlefield. And then we got Barter in Blood for 2 and 2 black. Each player sacrifices 2 creatures. Then we got Biting Rain for 2 and 2 black. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn, and it has Madness. And then Greed for 3 and a black. You can pay a black and pay 2 life to draw a card. Helpful, very helpful. And then we've got Blood Divination for 3 and a black. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature and you draw 3 cards. Then we got Sever the Bloodlines for 3 and a black. Exile target creature and all other creatures with the same name as that creature. This will definitely get rid of those pesky swerves. And it's got Flashback as well. And then Consuming Vapors for 3 and a black says target player sacrifices a creature, you gain life equal to that creature's toughness, and it's got Rebound, so it does it again next turn. And then we've got Destroy the Evidence for 4 and a black. You destroy a target land. Its controller reveals cards from the top of his or her library until he or she reveals a land, and puts those cards into the graveyard. And then Stinging Study for 4 and a black says you draw X cards and you lose X life, where X is the mana value of a commander you own on the battlefield or in the command zone. And then to round off this deck, we've got Unmake the Graves for 4 and a black. It's got Convoke. Return up to 2 target creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. And then Cauldron of Souls for 5 generic mana says tap, choose any number of target creatures. Each of those creatures gain Persist until end of turn. Now this has got a really nasty combo. Say you do those board wipes, right, that we got in this deck, and all your small creatures die, and you've got Gargamel up. Well, when they die, you then tap it to give them all Persist, so they come back and then they die again because most of them are 1/1s, and you've just doubled up your Gargamel. Good show. And then we've got Feast of Succession for 4 and 2 black. All creatures get -4/-4 until end of turn, and you become the monarch. Then we've got Essence Feed for 5 and a black. Target player loses 3 life. You gain 3 life and put 3/0/1 colorless Eldrazi spawn creature tokens onto the battlefield. They can sacrifice for a mana. Sometimes important. And then last but not least, we got Bolus of Citadel for 3 and 3 black. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay a life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost, and then you can tap it and sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. So something the wife thought I should add to this deck, and potentially upcoming decks if you all like it, is pros and cons. The pro for this deck is it's very resilient because it has a lot of graveyard shenanigans that it can pull, and it deals very well with creature and aristocrat style decks. The cons, however, the only type of removal this deck runs for artifact or enchantment strategies is player removal. But to be fair, that's the best type of removal, am I right? Now that we've gone through this Smurfin deck, it's time to check out the average price and the stats. At time of release, it's between 96 Smurfs and 137 Smurfs, depending on where you purchase from. As always, if you're willing to play with heavily played or damaged cards, it can be cheaper. And the stats for this deck, we've got 10 ramp, enough stuff to kind of make one tutor, 14 card draw, 17 interaction, plus a little bit extra if you consider all the death touchers, 6 board wipes, and 36 lands. Remember, this is a crossover themed build. With that being said, crucial cards for the theme were added regardless of price. Cards that were not essential to fit the theme were made as budget-friendly as possible. If you want to optimize this list, feel free to leave your upgrades in the comments section below. Most importantly, this deck is meant to be a new and engaging way to spice up your Commander games, so fun is the top priority. Thank you for watching this crossover deck tech. If you liked this video, check out our other content on YouTube or TikTok. Your viewership means the multiverse to the crossover commander, and if you would like to become a part of this growing Terran reality, you can like, share, and subscribe. If you would like to vote on the next pop culture character to crossover, check out our Patreon where we have some awesome perks. If you have any ideas or complaints, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Now that this portal's closing, see you next time.